Maria Annalyn de la Cruz walked slowly along the wide sidewalk of upscale San Diego Avenue. She wore worn jeans, a plain white tee, and had her hair in a bun held by a pencil. Her small, dark, attentive eyes took in the designer shop windows and luxury cars as if she were discovering the place for the first time. She carried a small cloth purse and kept a calm smile on her face. The expensive cars parked along the street contrasted with her simple look. But there was something in her gaze that showed she knew exactly why she was there. The showroom windows of Miller & Clark Motors gleamed in the morning sun. Inside, imported cars shone with flawless polish. Rolls-Royce, Ferrari, Lamborghini, all perfectly lined up. Annalyn paused at the mirrored facade and admired the navy blue Rolls-Royce Phantom she'd dreamed of owning for more than 5 years. She took a deep breath, shifted her purse strap on her shoulder, and stepped into the air-conditioned space, where the scent of fresh leather and men's cologne filled the air. The moment she crossed the threshold, every head turned, not in respect, but in silent judgment. A young salesman in a tight suit and forced smile was the first to approach. His name was Trevor, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you?" he said mechanically. Annalyn answered softly, "I'm interested in that blue Phantom in the window." He hesitated, his eyes flicking down to her scuffed sneakers. "That model starts at $300,000, he said, barely hiding his shock. "Perhaps you'd like to look at our pre-owned selection." Behind him, 2 other staff snickered. Annalyn simply smiled politely and said nothing more. As she calmly surveyed the showroom, Trevor discreetly signaled the manager, Scott Miller, watching from his glass-walled office. Scott emerged, straightening his dress shirt cuffs, and approached her with an air of superiority. "Good morning. I'm Scott, store manager. May I ask where you work?" Annalyn replied evenly, "I'm president of a foundation." He laughed dismissively. "A foundation? Ah, I see. Look, madam, this place is quite exclusive. Many people come just to look. I hope you don't mind if we suggest something more within your means." At that moment, Annalyn's expression turned serene, almost maternal. She didn't answer. She simply stared at the manager for a few seconds, then turned back to gaze at the car of her dreams. Scott folded his arms, impatient. "We can show you to the exit if you like." Annalyn gave a slight nod, turned wordlessly, and walked toward the door. On her way out, she passed a couple who had witnessed the scene. The woman whispered, "People like her shouldn't even enter places like this." Annalyn didn't stop. She just lifted her eyes to the clear sky and gave a small smile. Outside, the sun still shone brightly. Annalyn adjusted her loose hair, pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse, and checked something she'd jotted down. It was the address of a children's shelter she planned to visit later, where she'd help distribute school supplies. Her day would go on as usual. As she walked, she thought about how clueless those men were about who she really was and what she'd built. Since immigrating from the Philippines, Annalyn had learned not to take contempt personally, but to use it as silent fuel. Annalyn had arrived in the United States 24 years earlier with a borrowed suitcase and a heart full of hope. She worked as a nanny, cleaner, elder caregiver, and cook. She learned English by watching soap operas and listening to her patients talk. Over time, she earned a scholarship in special education. Gradually, her story intertwined with hundreds of children with disabilities and their families, who found in the De La Cruz Foundation not only help, but dignity. What began as donations of used clothes grew into one of the nation's largest philanthropic institutions. The De La Cruz Foundation funded medical treatments, specialized schools, free transportation, and psychological support for vulnerable families. Tech companies, celebrities, and even politicians had publicly praised her work. Yet Annalyn never let fame distract her. She preferred to stay focused on the children and the cause. She avoided events and interviews. Her face wasn't known, but her work was, and that was exactly how she wanted it. "It's not about me," she'd say. "It's about those who still need to be seen." She understood the power of anonymity and wore it like armor. That afternoon, when she arrived at the shelter, children ran up to hug her. She knelt to embrace each one, laughing warmly. The staff were used to her constant presence. She brought food, books, and toys. She talked to parents, asked about medications, and wrote everything in a well-worn but organized notebook. At day's end, as the sun set, Annalyn received a call from her husband, Emilio. "How was your visit?" he asked. "Interesting," she replied. "Want to know how they treated me?" On the other end, Emilio simply said, "I figured." Emilio Santos was as discreet as his wife, but in business he was a living legend. An investor in biotech and medical innovation, he was known for saving promising startups. He had a natural elegance, but shunned ostentation. His greatest pride was the story he built alongside Annalyn, from hard times to days of plenty. When she told him about the dealership incident, he showed no anger. He simply made mental notes. He knew there was a way to set things right, but he preferred the lesson be delivered with grace and impact. The next day, the sky was clear. The city woke under a soft morning glow. At Miller and Clark Motors, Trevor was prepping paperwork at the counter while Scott reviewed reports. Everything seemed normal until an imposing car rolled up to the entrance. It was the same navy blue Rolls-Royce Phantom from the window, but even shinier. The vehicle stopped at the revolving door, drawing curious stares. Passing drivers slowed down. Inside, silence fell. The car glided to a halt, as if it had always belonged there. The rear door opened. Emilio Santos stepped out in a light grey suit, blue shirt and polished shoes. His black hair was neatly combed, and his wristwatch gleamed subtly. He walked calmly, as though in no hurry to impress. The salesman exchanged glances, trying to place him. Scott straightened his tie and hurried to the door. "Good morning, sir. Welcome. How may I help you?" Emilio surveyed the showroom, then said quietly, "I'd like to buy a car. That one there." He pointed to the very model his wife had come to see. Scott beamed. "Excellent choice. May I show you the details?" Emilio shook his head. "No need. My wife was here yesterday and was asked to leave." Scott's smile froze. "Excuse me?" Emilio continued. "She came to look at this car and was judged by her appearance. That should never happen anywhere." Other customers were now watching. Trevor went pale. Emilio added, "I'll buy the car, but first I have a proposal." Silence settled over the room. A subtle tension filled the air. The manager swallowed hard and asked, "Shall we discuss this in my office?" The video of Annalyn being ignored, then returning with her powerful husband, went viral on social media. The caption read, "Never judge a book by its cover." Within hours, hundreds of thousands of views and comments poured in. Some praised the couple's dignity, others condemned the dealership. Many related personal stories of discrimination. Annalyn, however, stayed offline that day, preferring to focus on a project she'd been planning for months, a new school for neurodivergent children in underserved neighborhoods. The sting of rejection had become her silent fuel. Emilio called a business partner. "We turned embarrassment into opportunity," he said. His partner, used to Emilio's reserve, replied, "Annalyn really is something else." Emilio had always admired his wife's ability to rise above anger. He, raised in competitive finance, learned from her to see humanity in small acts. That morning was more than symbolism. It was a reminder of the values they vowed to uphold together. Back in the dealership, the atmosphere was awkward. Some employees, like Trevor, pretended nothing happened. Others, like receptionist Angela, felt genuine shame. She remembered mocking Annalyn's appearance. Now she carried a weight. At day's end, she approached Scott with an unusual idea. What if we run an awareness campaign with her foundation? Scott hesitated, still processing the shock. Do you think she'd agree? Angela answered, she forgives. She changes things with silence and resolve. That night, Annalyn and Emilio dined on the porch. Jasmine rice, steamed vegetables, grilled fish. Emilio said, I got a message from the dealership manager. Annalyn paused mid-bite. He wants to meet you, has a campaign idea. She raised an eyebrow. Genuine, Emilio replied calmly. I don't know, but it could be a door worth opening. She considered and said, it depends on the proposal and the attitude. 2 days later, Annalyn returned to the showroom with Carla, her project director specializing in social inclusion. This time, staff opened the door with visible respect. No red carpet, but sincere glances. Scott greeted them in a private office, folders of ideas and partnership sketches laid out. We want to learn from your foundation, create internal training, and use our platform to raise funds for your children, he said. Annalyn listened in silence, eyes reflecting possibility, not pride. We'll walk together, but one step at a time, she answered. Scott nodded, moved. For the first time he saw not a simple woman, but a silent, powerful leader. Soon billboards appeared around the city, children with disabilities smiling under the slogan, Eyes That See Beyond. The dealership and foundation logos appeared side by side. Sales dipped initially, some customers still grumbled, but gradually the honesty of the new stance won hearts. Annalyn joined a few shoots discreetly, always letting the children and families be the faces of the campaign. They need to be seen, she'd say. Her focus remained the mission, not the spotlight. Not everyone was pleased. Trevor, the same salesman who'd sneered at her, mocked the trainings behind closed doors. Now everyone's a saint? Angela, once silent, confronted him. She only asked for respect. That's all we owed her. Trevor laughed, but inside felt threatened. Company culture was shifting, and prejudice now meant formal warnings. That change frightened him more than any penalty. One afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived, Father Marcos from the local Filipino community. I heard your story. You inspire many of us, he said, embracing Annalyn. She replied, I did what anyone would. He smiled and handed her a small Santo Niño image. May it guide your path. Annalyn kept the token close, a reminder of home and faith. The Eyes That See Beyond campaign blew up nationwide. Companies were lining up, eager to copy the model. But Annalyn could spot who really wanted change and who just chased a good look. As she often said, charity for show is just theater. Charity for others is a real miracle. Her director, Carla, warned her they might be in the spotlight too long. Annalyn nodded. She knew they had to grow carefully. There were still thousands of invisible kids out there who needed help more than headlines. Then came the surprise invite. Harold Kensington, a billionaire in the luxury car world, wanted to meet Annalyn at his Los Angeles mansion. Emilio raised an eyebrow. That guy's all math and margins. He might use you. Annalyn just smiled. If he really listens, I can plant a seed. If not, I lose nothing but time. So they booked the trip. Kensington's estate was over the top. Marble fountains, crystal chandeliers, gardens that looked like art. Annalyn arrived in a simple beige dress and a light shawl. Harold greeted her with a courteous smile and said, "You're even more composed than I expected." Annalyn replied, "And you're more decorated than I imagined," with no hint of mockery. He laughed. Dinner was served in silence by uniformed staff, then the questions began. "Why do you think my dealerships need to change?" Harold asked at last. Annalyn looked him in the eye and said, "Because too many places treat people like numbers." True profit comes from trust, and trust needs real human care. Harold went quiet. Finally, he said, "I want to see one of your schools." That night, he admitted he was curious and off balance. A few days later, without fanfare, Harold showed up at an East Oakland school run by the foundation. No entourage, no cameras, just him. He spent the afternoon listening to kids with autism, visual impairments, cerebral palsy. A little boy with a cochlear implant looked up and said, "You speak fancy, sir, but my teacher taught me how to really hear the world." Harold sat on a bench afterward and quietly wept. He finally understood what Annalyn meant by real profit. Back at his mansion, he called a global video meeting of all his dealership directors. "We're launching Project Essence," he announced. Every location would have mandatory training in empathy, equity, and human-centered service, led by the De La Cruz Foundation. Annalyn would guide it with one rule: change starts at the top. Suddenly, CEOs and managers were visiting those same schools, hearing stories they once ignored. Everything shifted. Word spread across continents. Journalists wanted interviews, but Annalyn stayed true to her style. No big speeches, just small community talks. Emilio managed the press behind the scenes. "Fame is fire," he liked to remind her. "It can warm you or burn you." Together they made sure the heat fueled action, not ego. Then trouble arose. Renata, a former foundation employee, posted a video claiming Annalyn had once turned her son away. The clip went viral. Legal advisors urged an immediate rebuttal. Annalyn surprised everyone. "Let's hear her out." They met. Renata tearfully explained how she'd felt invisible. Annalyn listened, then said, "You were right to feel hurt. We'll fix our criteria so no one else is left out." The foundation issued a public apology and new guidelines. Renata took down her video and thanked Annalyn for truly hearing her. What could have torn them down only made their mission stronger. But not everyone cheered. Ethan Morell, heir to a rival chain, started spreading rumors. "It's all PR stunts." He bankrolled nasty posts and even staged protests. Emilio warned, "He's trying to unmoor you." Annalyn stayed calm. When stones fly at a real flower, you know it's blooming. She decided on a bold move, a public forum on bias in luxury retail. CEOs, staff, activists, customers, all were invited. Ethan refused, calling it manipulative. The forum aired on TV, and mothers and former customers shared raw stories. A teen with Tourette's thanked Annalyn for giving him a voice. Ethan, watching from afar, realized he'd lost before he even showed up. In the meantime, Emilio began feeling dizzy and short of breath. He shrugged it off as stress until Annalyn insisted on tests. The diagnosis was a congenital heart issue worsened by overwork. He needed surgery. Lying in the hospital bed, he held her hand and whispered, "If something happens, keep going. Our mission is bigger than us." Annalyn swallowed her fear and promised she would. On surgery day, the waiting room filled with letters and drawings from the foundation's children. Annalyn clutched her mother's rosary. 3 tense hours later, the surgeon emerged smiling. "He's stable and doing well." Annalyn exhaled like she hadn't in days. She walked into the recovery room to find Emilio groggy, but smiling. "You made it," she said. "Always," he replied. Back home, Emilio took things slow, while Annalyn kept the foundation running at a gentler pace. She named new regional leaders and started drafting a book titled Silence That Transforms, Stories from Many Lives, Not Just Hers. "This isn't about me," she wrote in the preface. "It's about anyone judged by their cover who surprised the world with their heart." A year after that fateful dealership visit, Miller and Clark Motors held a charity fair with foundation kids racing electric carts in the showroom. Mia, the wheelchair-using employee, spoke up. "Before being seen, I was heard." Scott announced that half that month's profits would fund new classrooms. They unveiled a mural of Annalyn, holding hands with a child, a simple tribute, no glam. Annalyn smiled, knowing the real sale was respect. The US Senate invited Annalyn to testify on consumer equity. Her foundation had become the gold standard. Nervous aides fussed, but she wore a simple light blue suit and spoke plainly. "I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to remind us that dignity begins in the eyes of the person who serves." She shared how she once sheltered a child in her garage before she had an office, and how the dealership humiliation became a chance for social change. Senators sat silent. Some wiped tears. When she stepped down, they rose in a standing ovation, not for noise, but for a lesson in quiet power. News outlets dubbed her the woman who reformed luxury. Retailers launched similar programs. A bank revamped its senior customer policies. A telecom hired neurodivergent moms for remote work. Yet Annalyn shrugged off the label. "I didn't reform anything. I just reminded us of basic respect." Meanwhile, critics mounted. Ethan Morrell hired lawyers to probe the foundation's tax status. Emilio assembled a team of legal and media experts. "If they try to dim your light, we'll use truth as our beacon," he told her. She replied, "Darkness always tries to snuff out a candle, but a candle never shouts, it just shines." Then an unexpected letter arrived from Trevor, the salesman who'd sneered at her. He'd been fired, hit rock bottom, then realized his anger was self-fear. He thanked her for not humiliating him when she could have. Annalyn paused, then wrote back, "To err is human. To grow from error is divine. Welcome back." With Scott's blessing, Trevor returned, not as a salesman, but as diversity coordinator. In his first internal talk, he said, "I was the example of what not to do. Now I want to build bridges." His redemption became proof that culture change can include forgiveness. Inspired, the foundation launched the Silence Institute, a training center for community leaders, sales staff, teachers, even police, focusing on empathetic listening and relational justice. Universities partnered, volunteers flocked. On day one, Annalyn appeared in jeans and a tee. "Welcome, here every voice matters." 25 years after arriving in the US, her foundation had served over 200,000 children and trained thousands. At a small ceremony, the first child she'd helped, now a physiotherapist, presented her with flowers, calling her our root. Annalyn smiled. "I'm just the gardener." Emilio held her hand, knowing the story was only halfway done. Ethan's smear campaign backfired. Journalists debunked his lies, and the foundation gained even more supporters. Carla quipped, "His poison became our medicine." Annalyn said, "Sometimes venom heals, if it finds the right host." She declined an Ivy League speaking invitation, preferring community centers, but agreed to mentor immigrant youth. When one asked how she endured humiliation, she answered, "No one moment defines you. You are made of many." And the teen wept. He'd never been treated as potential instead of problem. Across the globe, pilot projects sprang up in the Philippines, Mexico, Mozambique, applying her listening-first philosophy. A school in Manila bore her name, De La Cruz Learning Center. Seeing the plaque, she wept. It wasn't just honor, it was a seed returning home. Her story became a book, a play, a radio series for seniors, yet she remained among the children, notebooks in hand. "I'm traveling," she'd say. "Each life is a new place." Then Carla's car wreck left her in a coma for days. Annalyn kept vigil with flowers and readings. On day 6, Carla awoke and whispered, "The seed is still alive?" Annalyn squeezed her hand through tears. "Yes, and you'll see it bloom." To celebrate Carla's recovery, the foundation held a silent inclusion walk. No signs, no chants, just 20,000 people wearing "Those Who Listen Transform" shirts, walking in unity. From balconies, onlookers tossed petals. It was silent revolution. News broke that Harold Kensington bought Miller & Clark Motors and wanted to rename it Dela Cruz Motors. Scott called to ask. Annalyn thought, then agreed. Use my name, but remember why. Her only condition was that a portion of profits permanently fund scholarships for immigrant children. Kensington accepted on the spot. Leaving the meeting, Annalyn paused under overcast skies pierced by a ray of sunlight. She smiled. Battle ahead, but truth always finds a way. As long as someone listens with humility and courage, the world can still change. And the real luxury, she knew, is in the grace of hearing and being heard. The renaming of the dealership to Dela Cruz Motors made international headlines. Offers for interviews poured in, but Annalyn politely declined. She wanted the story told by those whose lives changed, not by her. When asked about her name on a luxury car brand, she said, "If it builds bridges, I'll wear it. Just don't turn it into a pedestal." Reporters, used to fame-hungry guests, were disarmed by her humility. She remained the woman of quiet steps and watchful eyes, true to herself. Meanwhile, Emilio and Carla unveiled the Garden of Silence at the Foundation's headquarters, a peaceful courtyard with recycled wood benches, Philippine medicinal plants, children's quotes etched in stone, and a reflecting pool. "You taught the world to listen," Emilio said. "Now it must listen to you." At the dedication, a neurodivergent choir sang in English and Tagalog. A plaque read, "The greatest voice is the one that chooses when to speak." Mothers wept. This serene space embodied the gentle power of silent leadership, but adversity struck again. Ethan Morell tried to block a land donation for the Silence Institute and sued Emilio for conflict of interest. The case made headlines. Emilio smiled wryly. "He's digging his own grave." Annalyn convened her board. "We won't fight fire with fire. We'll answer with work." They mobilized families and volunteers to record short videos about how the foundation changed their lives. Authentic testimonies, grandparents, siblings, young adults, flooded social media. Courts dismissed Ethan's suit. The judge declared, "When compassion becomes policy, the law cannot shield intolerance." Ethan's empire crumbled. With peace restored, Annalyn focused on expanding the institute, adding a health professional training wing and an immigrant workshop program covering language, culture, and self-esteem. "Inclusion begins with listening, but needs structure," she explained. Berkeley offered full scholarships to graduates. "I don't want admiration," she said. "I want transformation. Admiration fades, change endures." One afternoon, Annalyn revisited her first U.S. home. A bakery now stood where her tiny rented room was. She slipped inside, touched the corner where her suitcase once lay, and left an envelope. Here began a forest. The baker later donated weekly bread to the foundation. "The miracle of bread," volunteers called it. Annalyn laughed. "Not miracle, living memory." Each anonymous act of kindness, she believed, mattered more than any speech. That evening, she and Emilio climbed into their motorhome for open road, visiting rural towns, schools, and forgotten communities. No podiums, just circles on the ground. At each stop, they left a wooden bench inscribed, "Here someone was heard." Some called it furniture of dignity. To Annalyn, it was simply gratitude in wood and words. During a Texas stop, an elderly woman shared the loss of her autistic grandson. Annalyn held her hand and said, "You can speak now. We're here." The woman wept and thanked them. That moment became a chapter in Annalyn's third book. Open Road later became public policy in 3 states. Mobile listening centers traveled on trucks. Annalyn joked, "I'm on the map now." She corrected herself. Better to be a path than a landmark. Back in Manila, via video conference, Annalyn opened the International Silence Institute office. From San Diego, she watched volunteers unfold the mural of children's drawings. She said, "Concrete walls hold stories, and each starts with someone choosing to listen." She requested one empty room, no furniture, only mats, for silent reflection. As age advanced, Annalyn prepared her succession, naming 4 leaders for listening, resolve, creativity, and empathy. One alone is not enough. Together they are. She handed them folders and handwritten notes. Carla teased, "You're sprouting seeds inside the trunk." Annalyn smiled. "A true tree teaches even as it falls." In her final public address, she wrote, "I leave no legacy, only seeds. They flourish not by my name, but by your listening. No one must be humiliated to be seen." She passed the presidency to an immigrant woman trained at the institute. It was a symbolic full circle, dignity handed on. Months later, Annalyn wrote anonymous letters of encouragement delivered to hospitals, schools, and businesses. "You are stronger than you know." Recipients posted them on fridges and walls. A newspaper guessed she wrote them. She never confirmed. "It's not who writes," she said, "it's who reads and rises." One quiet Sunday, Annalyn passed away in her sleep, rosary in hand, notebook at her side. Her last entry read, "If you seek me, look in the eyes of those who listen with heart." Her funeral was simple, yet thousands, children, elders, business leaders, stood in silence, hands joined. They mourned not loss, but celebrated gratitude. At the foundation, the Annalyn Space invites 5 minutes of silent listening before any activity. "Before speaking for others, listen," reads the plaque. Her story lives on in every silent seed planted, every heart opened. Where a cold dealership once stood, Dela Cruz Motors now buzzes with learning and respect. The navy blue Phantom remains as witness, not of status, but of transformation. And so Maria Annalyn de la Cruz's journey continues. In each listening ear, each blossoming life, each silent act of dignity. Months after the Manila opening, the Silence Institute's new international headquarters officially launched. Annalyn joined via video conference from her simple San Diego office, the children's mural behind her. "These walls are concrete, but they rest on stories," she said. "Every story begins when someone chooses to listen." She asked that one room remain empty, just mats and silence for reflection. Back in the US, Annalyn dove into writing her second book, Invisible Roots, a collection of immigrant stories of silent discrimination in high-end spaces. She wasn't out to accuse, but to awaken. "Pain need not shout to be real," she wrote. The book became required reading at business schools. At the launch, she skipped the main stage for a community circle. "If we rise, let's rise together," she told students. Aware of her advancing years, Annalyn prepared succession. She named 4 leaders, each embodying listening, resolve, creativity, and empathy. "One alone can't do it all," she said. She gave them folders and handwritten notes. Carla joked, "You're sprouting seeds inside the trunk." Annalyn smiled. "A true tree teaches even as it falls." Emilio proposed Open Road, a mobile listening tour in a converted motorhome. "We bring the Institute on wheels," he said. They traveled rural towns, schools, and forgotten communities, sitting in circles on the ground. At each stop, they left a bench inscribed, "Here someone was heard." Some called them benches of dignity. For Annalyn, they were simply acts of gratitude. During a Texas stop, an elderly woman approached. "Are you the ones from TV?" she asked. Annalyn replied, "Sometimes. Today we're just visitors." The woman, tearful, spoke of losing her autistic grandson. Annalyn held her hand. "You can speak now. We're listening." The woman wept. That moment became a chapter in Annalyn's next book. Open Road, inspired 3 state policies, creating mobile listening centers. Annalyn quipped, "I'm on the map now." She corrected herself. Better to be a path than a landmark. One day, she received a letter from a young man adopted after attending a foundation school. Now a lawyer fighting discrimination, he wrote, "I am you 30 years ago. Today I am many because someone listened." Annalyn placed the letter in a box of hundreds. "This is my true fortune," she told Carla. At the Foundation's 30-year anniversary, children reenacted real stories on stage. 8-year-old Lucia, with cerebral palsy, read, "You don't know me, but you changed my life." Annalyn, in the front row, covered her face. Afterwards, she hugged Lucia. "You hold the lantern." The audience wept, not in pity, but in honor. In her final board meeting as president, Annalyn read her farewell. "I leave no legacy, only seeds. They grow not by my name, but by your listening. May no one need humiliation to be recognized." She passed the torch to an immigrant woman trained at the Institute. The circle was complete. Annalyn spent her remaining days writing anonymous letters of encouragement. "You are stronger than you know." Delivered in hospitals, schools, and offices, recipients posted them on fridges and walls. When asked, she'd only say, "It's not who writes, but who reads and rises." On a quiet Sunday, Annalyn walked the foundation garden. A child ran up. "Are you the lady on the wall?" Pointing to her mural, she laughed. "I was. Now I'm friend of the flowers." The child handed her a paper bloom. "My mum says you listen even without hearing." Annalyn knelt. Listening is loving without rush. That night she fell asleep and did not wake. Emilio found her with the rosary in hand and notebook by her side. Her last line, "If you seek me, find me in the eyes of those who listen with heart." Her funeral was simple, no grand eulogies, just silent tribute. Thousands stood in quiet solidarity, grateful rather than mournful. At the foundation, the Annalyn space was created. No portraits, only children's phrases. "She saw me. She heard me. She taught me to speak without shame." Visitors sit 5 minutes in silence before any activity. The ritual spread to other nonprofits. Before speaking for others, listen. Emilio, now widowed, continued Open Road, saying, "When I listen to others, I feel her near." He carried her wooden rosary, a simple object heavy with history. "She held the world with this," he'd tell strangers. The world, unknowingly, held on to her. Annalyn's books are taught globally. The Institute grew yet kept its soul. Each new center opened with her letter. First, breathe. Then remember, what you see can deceive, but what you hear reveals. Her silent voice guides each location. Where once stood a cold, arrogant dealership, now thrives Dela Cruz Motors, a center of inclusion and respect. The navy blue Phantom remains on display, not as status, but as testimony to transformation. And so Maria Annalyn Dela Cruz's story lives on, in every listening ear, every planted seed, every heart touched by dignity.